The 5 days that Napoleon spent in Smolensk gave Kutuzov a chance to prepare an ambush near Krasny. On November 14, the town was occupied by a detachment of General Ogerovsky. By the evening of the same day, Clapard, who was leading the French vanguard, came up and attacked. The Russians were driven out of the town and retreated 4 kilometers south to the village of Kutkovo. Kutuzov's main forces were 30 kilometers to the southeast. On November 15, at 3 p.m., Napoleon and his guards arrived in Krasny. The young guard under the command of Mortier remained at a distance from the town to support the French corps moving from Smolensk. Napoleon decided to stay in the town to get accurate information about the enemy's movements. In the evening, Junot's and Poniatowski's corps came up. On the night of the 16th, a division of the young guard under the command of Roge suddenly attacked Ozerovsky. After a heavy fighting, the Russian general retreated east to Shalovo. For more than an hour, the division fought with bayonets, mixing with the enemy, Roge reported in his report. Finally, terrified by the horrific massacre, the enemy soldiers who were still alive rushed back. The main events of the 16th took place near the village of Merlino in the east by the main road. The Russian troops of Miloradovich and Raevsky blocked the way to the Beauharnais corps. Napoleon sent his stepson 2 Guards battalions under the command of Duranel. This helped Beauharnais to avoid encirclement and total destruction. Nevertheless, he suffered heavy losses and at night was able to bypass and secretly pass to Krasny by country roads, abandoning his transport and artillery. Kutuzov approached the village of Shalovo on the 16th and stopped there. The situation of the French was critical. Davout and Ney's corps could have been cut off. The enemy's intentions were also unclear. On the morning of the 17th, both commanders went into action. Napoleon planned to divert the main forces of the Russians so that Davout and Ney could rejoin the army. By this time, the corps of Junot and Poniatowski had already been moved to the west. The young guard troops were deployed for the battle. Kutuzov, thinking that Napoleon had retreated from Krasny, ordered Tormasov's troops to bypass the town from the south and enter the village of Dobroya in the rear of Napoleon, cut the road to Orsha. General Golitsyn was ordered to advance through the village of Uvarovo on Krasny. Miloradovich's troops had to let Davout pass and attack him from the rear together with Golitsyn. The Russian command did not expect enemy attacks. In the morning the young guard attacked the village of Uvarovo. The Russians stubbornly defended their positions. Kutuzov, having seen the guard in action and having learned that Napoleon was still in Krasny, immediately suspended the bypass movement of Tormasov's troops. According to the plan, Miloradovich missed Davout and attacked him from the rear. Davout, like Beauharnais, was forced to leave the main road, abandon part of the transport and artillery and go bypass the country road to reach Krasny. Learning that the Russians were trying to cut him off at the village of Dobroja, Napoleon ordered a retreat from the town without waiting for Ney. At 11 a.m. the emperor left the town. The young guard, numbering 15,000 men, took an unequal fight. The Russians had a special advantage in artillery. An officer of the young guard recalled this day, the Russians, whose black and deep masses of troops appeared in the distance, put up a 30-gun battery in the morning, and soon the number of guns in it doubled. For the first time our young soldiers heard the sharp whistle of the nukes and the more deafening boom of the passing grenades, followed by the rumble of bursts. Our old general, Delaborde, rode slowly along the ranks and said, well, boys, lift up your noses higher, one day you must smell gunpowder for the first time." These words of the general were greeted by the soldiers with joyous exclamations and shouts of "Long live the Emperor!" In order to prevent the Russian guns from shooting the young guard, General Rapp moved forward the 1st Voltigeur Regiment under the command of Payan. There were no more than 300 men left in the regiment's ranks that day. The battalion commander Payan moved forward with all intrepidity and, seeing that the enemy had slackened fire, decided that he could continue the movement all the way to the forest occupied by the enemy. But the attack of the Voltigas, carried on too far from the main line of battle, proved fatal to them. The regiment was attacked on all sides of the cuirassiers of General Ducky. The Voltygas, however, managed to repel the first attacks of the cuirassiers. Then the Russians rolled out several guns and almost at point-blank range and opened fire with grapeshot. The heroic resistance of the carriage of the 1st Voltigeur could not be indefinite. The Revelskaya and Murom regiments under the command of Prince Shakovsky struck at it with bayonets, and Duki's cuirassiers broke into the carriage and completed the extermination of the Voltygas. Out of 300 people only 50 soldiers and 11 officers survived, most of them wounded by blows of palashes and bayonets. All of them were taken prisoner. The 3rd Grenadier Regiment, which fought that day in the ranks of the Young Guard, also perished almost completely. Of the 305 soldiers and officers who had stood the day before the battle in the ranks of the unit, by the end of the day only 36 men remained. As dusk fell, Marshal Mortier ordered the Young Guard to retreat. The next day, Ney's vanguard tried to break through Krasny. Parts of his corps were forced to delay in Smolensk, and there was a significant gap in the movement between it and the corps of Davout. Ney had 6,000 to 8,000 soldiers in the line and about the same number of non-combatants. Events developed according to approximately the same, but more dramatic scenario, as with Beauharnais and Davout. The Russians were sure that already all the French corps had left Smolensk. And initially Ney managed to advance, but then he was stopped in front of Krasny and subsequent desperate attacks were unsuccessful due to the numerical advantage of the Russians. In order to gain time, Ney delayed the arriving Russian parliamentarian with a proposal to surrender, then, after waiting for darkness and gathering all the combat ready, about 3,000 people, moved to the right of the road, towards the Dnieper, and on thin ice, putting logs and boards as bridges, crossed the river at Syrokoreny. He was already considered dead, but on November 20 he reached Orsha, fighting off Platov's Cossack regiments, and brought up to 800 men. The total losses of the French at Krasny were horrifying, more than 10,000 people killed, from 19 to 30,000 prisoners, in the hands of the winners got 200 to 266 guns, figures vary, a huge transport, several eagles and even Davout's marshal's baton. Russian losses were minimal, from 2 to 4,000 men.